There's a lot of focus on the Mueller investigation, and so much is out of focus for the American public. People don't understand what's going on. General Kelly was on television last night saying middle America doesn't really care. But, if the media keeps reporting on something, well, the public will eventually care. But what if we're all missing something about this investigation? Something that a lot of us who are skeptical of the president wouldn't want to admit, the left could never bring themselves to admit. But what if it's true? What if the President of the United States is a victim? We know that Paul Manafort worked for a rogues gallery of bad people, particularly in Eastern Europe. And the left would have us believe, well, Donald Trump is just one of those bad people in the rogues gallery. Paul Manafort was living in Trump Tower. He knew President Trump. We know the Russians were looking to have people work both sides. The Russians weren't in this to help Donald Trump get elected. They were in this to sow discord among the American public. They were in this to make both sides fight each other and so distrust each other that we focused inward as a nation and we couldn't even look to what Russia was doing. So they had a Podesta disrupting the Clinton campaign, hopefully, maybe, we don't know. And then there's Paul Manafort. What if Paul Manafort went to work for Donald Trump, not because he wanted to help President Trump, but because he wanted to help some of his clients, Russia, Ukraine, others? We know that he helped scale back the language from the Republican platform on Ukraine. What if this was all something else, something we don't realize, something bigger? That the president was a victim. Now, I realize there will be questions about the president's judgment then, and there will be other concerns about the president because of this, a lack of judgment, what have you. Why did they know the president was such an easy mark? But it is a possibility here we don't want to consider. Those of us who were never Trump during the campaign, we were deeply skeptical of the president to begin with, and we cried foul. I wrote a lot about Paul Manafort and how he was Moscow's favorite political consultant. There were all sorts of red flags. But then those of us who are skeptical of the president, if you're on the president's team, you would believe, well, these guys are going to say whatever they can about the people who work with us. Look, even now, on the left and even some people on the right are attacking people who work for the president. They don't want the president surrounded by people who can give him competent advice. They want these people to quit. So, of course, if you're in the bunker during a campaign, you're going to be skeptical of anyone raising these concerns. It's only natural. The left wants to fixate on the president and Russia because they cannot believe that Hillary Clinton was beaten by Donald Trump. They have to come up with another reason, and their reason is that Russia stole the election. The Russians stole the election, and that's why Donald Trump became president, according to the left. No, that's not true. There's no evidence of it. There's no evidence of vote rigging. Even the claims about the Russian use of social media, they were just doing standard targeting that anyone else could have done, and it's stuff Hillary Clinton did not do. In fact, we know that the Clinton campaign did not take advantage of offers that Facebook and others were making to use social media. They thought they had it in the bag. She didn't even go to Wisconsin, but they can't admit she was a bad candidate, and they can't admit she ran a bad campaign. So they're focused on Russia, and that has developed in the media, which is of the left, this idea that the Trump campaign, they collaborated with the Russians, that there was some level of concern and collaboration and conversation going on between Donald Trump and the Russians. But now we know from George Papadopoulos, according to his testimony, the Russians said they already had the emails. So the Trump campaign wasn't working with Russians to try to get Hillary Clinton's emails or even leak them. The Russians already said they had them, according to Papadopoulos in his testimony. So what then? Well, listen, it's still a wild card scenario, and I know the social media angst that's going to come from this. But what if the Russians did look at the president and think he was an easy mark? And they had Paul Manafort, he's already living in Trump Tower. He already knows the president, work his way onto the campaign. Not for the president's interest, but for Russia's interest. Russia was never in this for Donald Trump to win. And this makes so much more sense when you finally acknowledge that the Russians weren't in this for Trump to win. They were in this to sow discord. They were in this to help themselves. They wanted people on both sides. They had a Podesta on the Clinton side, it looks like. They had a Manafort on the Trump side. And Manafort could get closer to Trump than Tony Podesta could to Hillary Clinton, although his brother was involved in the campaign. And if that's true, the president is a victim here. We don't want to think about that. Those of us who are skeptical of the president, meaning on the left, will never concede it. The people who are still never Trump, who don't want to give the president the benefit of the doubt, they'll be angry at the possibility. And set aside all your questions about concerns and judgment and the president being an easy mark. Those are fair questions. Those are fair concerns. But the underlying foundational issue is we should be open to the possibility the Russians looked at the president and said, we can get our guy on the inside. They've done it at the CIA, they've done it at the State Department. Why not a presidential campaign? The Chinese have spies all around the country embedded in government. Why not a presidential campaign? It's a possibility we should be open to. Now, it's a possibility many people will reject because they would much rather believe the Russians stole the election with Donald Trump's help than that Hillary Clinton was a bad candidate. But for those of us who can set that aside and recognize Hillary lost to Donald Trump fair and square, maybe we should consider this. I'm not saying it's the answer, but it's something that we need to consider because it seems very much that the Russians, they were playing all sides. They were playing the United States. They weren't just playing the Democrats. They weren't just playing to get Donald Trump elected. I'm Erick Erickson for TheResurgent.com.